شكرا للأستاذ عصام التيسي على طرحه للتقرير. حضور الكريم، نتطلع إلى تفاعلكم بالطبع مجددا عبر قنوات التواصل الاجتماعي الخاصة باقتصادية دبي _ DED وهاشتاج منتدى الإمارات الاقتصادي 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, the hashtag in English is, write it down on your hand because I don't trust my hand, hashtag UAE 2019. I repeat, hashtag UAE 2019. ونتابع. حضور الكريم، سننتقل بكم الآن إلى الجلسات النقاشية الأولى تحت عنوان الشركات الصغيرة والمتوسطة قوة دافعة للنمو. سيركز النقاش على التحديات التي تواجهها المشاريع الصغيرة والمتوسطة في تنمية وتطوير إمكانياتها والعمل على تحديد الخيارات السياسية اللازمة لدعم تطورها المستقبلي. نود الآن ونذكر بأنه قد يفتح المجال لطرح بعض الأسئلة، ولكن لضيق الوقت الحالي سنبدأ بدعوة رئيس الجلسة. رحبوا معنا بسعادة الشيخ فهد القاسمي، الرئيس التنفيذي في دائرة العلاقات الحكومية بالشركة. المتحدثون بالطبع هم يوسف كروز، رئيس الشركات الصغيرة والمتوسطة في الاتحاد المصرفي الإماراتي. أرجان أوتكوتي، مدير الأعمال الصغيرة والمتوسطة في مايكروسوفت. كارل فيلدر، المدير التنفيذي في نيوترال فيولز. ورائد الأعمال خليفة الجزيري. هذا رحبنا بهم جميعا. بالطبع حضورنا الكريم، سننوه الآن أيضا بانعقاد الورشة المغلقة لممثلي دوائر التنمية الاقتصادية الخاصة بكل إمارة، والتي تسلط الضوء على الأهداف الرئيسية للخطط الاستراتيجية الحالية لدولة الإمارات وإنجازاتها. المنصة لنا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I think for the sake of the panel and most of our attendees today, I hope you allow me to speak in English. We are very excited to be discussing not a hot topic today, but I think a topic that is so important for the sustainable growth of the United Arab Emirates, and specifically the Emirate of Dubai. We're going to talk about SMEs. On the panel with me today, we have Khalifa Jaziri, an entrepreneur changing the world in terms of home automation and building systems. Karl Feilder, CEO of Neutral Fuels, who have here in the Emirate of Dubai been leading and pioneering biofuels, a company that maybe shares as many profits as you do purpose. Thank you very much for joining us. Yusuf Cruz, the chairman of the Federation, and last but not least, Arjan Odekota, the director of small and medium businesses at quite a large business, Microsoft. I think we will try today to make sure this is quite engaging. I think you've been spoken to quite a bit, so hopefully we can hear a little bit from you and open the floor to questions. Plus, if technology permitting, we shall have some questions for you to engage and hopefully get your opinions. So instead of asking these very, very qualified gentlemen first, I thought I'd ask the audience. How many people here are involved with, own, head, or are employed by what they define as an SME? Aslam, I'm not sure, Doctor, you can... Involved. I personally, I'm an investor, so that's why I could raise my hand. So this audience today is not very reflective of the 94% of the total number of companies in the UAE that are in fact SMEs. 86% of the private sector's workforce are employed at SMEs. And here in the Emirate of Dubai, 42% of the total workforce are employed by SMEs. 40% of Dubai's GDP, which I think leads me first maybe to Khalifa as maybe the representative of the SME sector. Can you begin by explaining to us the challenge, but fundamentally more the reason that you felt Dubai and the UAE was a place where you could start and thrive as an SME?
Assalamu alaikum, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm glad to be able to present part of what the SME is doing in the region. I mean, luckily being an Emirati, I found myself in this great region, let's say in Dubai specifically, where it is a natural, let's say fertile ground for growth. And that's where I started early in the 2003 and 4 to create a technology company. To be honest, I didn't want just, at that time I was in my early 20s, I didn't want just to start and just get employed and that regular routine of going to work, coming in the evening and things could just go ahead, because I just wanted to create an impact. So to create an impact, I thought I have to do my own failures to learn from, to be able and come up with something. Company, and funny enough, if you start, every time people ask me like, Khalifa, how you started? What pushed you to start? I said it's a junk mail. Actually, I received a junk mail. I think I lost. Can you hear me? Is it because of the junk mail? I got like some blocked or something? Yeah, I think something's wrong with the audio. Actually, I received a junk mail, and that junk mail just triggered me to read about a topic. And from that junk mail, I found myself now, let's say almost 20 years, plus minus from that junk mail, being one of the leaders who set standards for government to follow in the region, in smart cities and like future cities. To be honest, I found a lot of challenges because when I started this thing, I was the first Emirati to do that, and I didn't have any reference. So I didn't have reference. People thought like Emiratis cannot do that. We don't have the right technology, skill sets in the region. And to be honest, it was a problem at that time. That's why I had to use some assistance from UK, use some assistance from US, from China, and from many other European countries to be able to create something where people can see right now. But looking at the environment change throughout these 15 years, I can tell you the current entrepreneurs are lucky. Because if you've seen all the programs we have, it's much easier to start and thrive in this environment with all these supporting initiatives that we had. In our days, I didn't have much. We had Dubai SME, and then Khalifa Fund came on board, but still, we didn't have someone who can mentor us in how to create technology in the region, because we are more like a consumer-based industry rather than a technology generator. So I'm glad to tell you we have more than 70, 80 products with our full IP related to smart home and smart buildings. And we are now competing and challenging international companies who are big names, and they might be 100 or 200 times our value.
Well, I wish all the success for you going forward, but you are the exception. Today we talk about entrepreneurs, specifically. The future of SMEs is technology. Every young person I speak to comes to me for investment with an app. Karl, you have a very different background, having seen the ups, some of the downs 10 years ago. You have a company in biofuels that is leading the region. Did you have a mentor? Why did you choose the UAE to set up a biofuel company in a hydrocarbon producing country?
I think that some people would say because I'm mad. But then I think some people would say that all entrepreneurs are mad. And I think that the challenge is that if you wake up every morning thinking, why is that like that? And how can we make it better? That actually puts you as a little bit alien outside the rest of society, because most people want to accept the status quo. And entrepreneurs are hardwired to challenge the status quo. We want to make things better, we want to change the world, and we can't help ourselves. So my opportunity coming here was that I'd previously sold 5 companies, I'd done 2 IPOs, I'd had a fantastic career, but I wanted to do it somewhere where I could genuinely make a difference. And to bring biofuels to the Middle East, where there were no biofuels. There was nothing whatsoever going on with biofuels here. And the Economic Department said to me, first of all, are you crazy? Secondly, would you like our help? And I said, yes, I would. I'd love your help. So we went through an incredible process. It was fascinating, wonderfully supportive, but it was interesting for all of us. I mean, we had to create new categories. We had to create and do things that had never been done before. But then that's the same for all of us that are entrepreneurs. We're always going through new barriers. The interesting thing now is that we're in a position where we're teaching the local community about biofuels. We're out in the schools, we're out in universities, we're bringing new graduates into our business and helping educate them, and we're now taking it to other countries. So this morning I had signed our first agreement in Bahrain. We will open in Bahrain in the next few months. We're taking our business, we exported the first biofuel into Saudi Arabia last month. That really was an incredible thing to be able to do. And we're going to open up in India at the start of next year. So we're taking a Dubai-created business that was engineered with the talent that we have here and taking it to the wider region. And that's exactly what we need to do as entrepreneurs and as people with a vision for where the future needs to be.
I think for those of you that don't know me, I'm sometimes a little too brutally honest. So expect a very sort of different panel today. And Arjun and Yusuf, we will get to the ecosystem and some of the other themes, but I want to focus with the two gentlemen that run SMEs. A lot of young people want to become entrepreneurs. And there is a misconception that entrepreneurs are young. We all want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. We want to be billionaires by 23. But the honest truth is the average cut, successful entrepreneurs and most startup founders, for example, are in their 40s. Do we need to encourage the young generation to work in SMEs, to understand what it takes to build a business? If so, how many young Dubai residents, Emiratis do you hire in your companies today that are learning from people that have succeeded like yourself?
So we have a very active internship program. Over the last 5 years, we've had 39 local graduates come through our business, and we've knocked off some of the rough corners that they have. Often they come out of university and they have some very strange ideas about what the working environment is. We've had a real challenge in trying to get female graduates to come and work with us. Often they are hampered by family commitments. Often they have real challenges to actually come and work. But we've been very successful at bringing them into our environment and showing them that work can be fun and it can be challenging and stimulating and all the great things that you want out of a career, and that you don't have to go and work for some massive corporation in order to have a career trajectory. So yes, I think we need to encourage them into our businesses, but one thing I did want to point, and that I think is missed in many of the speeches I've heard today, I don't think you can teach somebody to be an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneurs are born. I think you can teach them to be better. But I think that the fundamental characteristics of being an entrepreneur are something that we are born with. And if you're not born with them, then you're not going to succeed. The motivation to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because you've got a bright idea and you really want to fix it is not something that you can teach somebody. It's something that comes from deep down.
Sorry, Khalifa pointed to your heart.
Yes, I was almost about to cry a while ago. No, actually, because you want us to be honest, and I'll be very honest. The number of people I have hired locals is 0, unfortunately, and that's not because of the problem coming from us only. It's from the local Emirati expectation. To be honest, when you compare the average salaries of people working in my company or the majority of private sectors, let's say they will average between 15 to 25,000, and you go out to government jobs, they will start at 25 and maybe go up to 60. So the problem with those youth, by the time they are almost finishing their universities, majority of them, I'm not saying all for sure, they are already dreaming of their marriage plans, their home buildings, and the next Ferrari or whatever car they want to buy. And that puts them into thinking more, what job will give me the higher income so I can start my loan journeys and rush to the nearest bank 3 months after being hired to try and get all these things. And as you said, people also have this wrong conception that if you are working, if you are an entrepreneur or going to join an SME, you don't expect from the first, let's say, 6 months or 1 or 2 years to be paid that high, because you need to earn it. It's not like a birthright because you're Emirati, you'll be paid 20,000 the day you enter. But that's honestly what's causing the gap. Because I do some work in Kuwait as well, I've noticed they have a very nice program. So what do they say to the private sector? If he is an Emirati, hire him into whatever your current job offer is. So for example, I'm hiring an Emirati and I can only pay him 20,000 or 15,000 a month, where this Emirati value and qualification will be paid in the government 22,000, so they shoulder the difference. And this way, there is no problem or there is no gap on me or burden on me as a private sector to hire him, and still he is not going to be suffering the loss of the 7,000 per month or whatever is the value. So I think something like that can be introduced if it's possible. That will encourage a lot of the locals to do SMEs. And I honestly, before I was saying that it's good for for anyone who graduate to work 1 or 2, 3 years before starting his own journey, because he needs to see what's life really. But now it's even better if he can work in an SME for 1 or 2, 3 years and then start his own, because then he sees how it happens in SMEs. To be honest, I worked for government for 7 years, part of that where I was an SME, I created an SME myself. So it differs completely between how the business go run in governments versus in the private sector. In private sector, your failure this week might harm you next month. In the government sector, there is a bit of a cushion for people to fail.
I think we're being very honest that I've been told now they need to make an announcement, so please excuse. If they announce that we need to be less honest, I will.
Thank you very much. This won't take long. أود أن أجلب انتباه ممثلي دوائر التنمية الاقتصادية الخاصة بكل إمارة إلى انعقاد الورشة المغلقة الآن، والتي تسلط الضوء على الأهداف الرئيسية للخطط الاستراتيجية الحالية لدولة الإمارات وإنجازاتها. نرجو من ممثلي هذه الدوائر التوجه إلى القاعة الثانية لبدء تلك الجلسة المغلقة، مع بقاء الحضور الكريم هنا لاستكمال الحلقة النقاشية الحالية، وشكرا.
I think I want to pick up on something you said. I started my career in the private sector. I was working for an organization, and with my first salary, I wanted to start some companies with some friends, and instead of going out and getting a loan to buy, I'm half German, so I wanted a Porsche, not a Ferrari. Instead of buying the Porsche, I got a personal loan to help fund a company with a friend of mine. Very lucky, risk, reward, it happens, alhamdulillah, everything worked out. But maybe you're a company that has started 1, 2 years in, you need that little bridge. Yusuf, the UAE Banking Federation, we've talked, we're getting straight into the hot topics now. Financing for SMEs, funding for SMEs. How does the Banking Federation look at this important part of the economy, a real driver for growth in the country, and manage the risk-reward paradigm in making sure they succeed without taking too much risk on our financial sector?
Okay. Hello? Yes. Okay. First of all, I agree with my previous colleague from Dubai SME that SME is not just an issue of financing or of the government support, it's the entire ecosystem. Now, to answer your question directly regarding the UBF, especially in the last 3 years, and even more specific in the last 1 year, SME has been a major focus in terms of drive, support, and to come up with new ideas of how to stimulate the SME sector and the economy. All the stakeholders are there, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, the Central Bank, very high-level discussions, specific workshops, amendments to laws and regulations, and streamlining, making it easier for financing to trickle down. Now, there's one thing which you mentioned earlier, and I appreciate that, is being honest and blunt. We have to be frank that a couple of years ago, the banks did suffer major losses in the SME sector. They were actually quite aggressive in financing SMEs. And maybe not all practices were very, I'll put it, economical. Earlier it was mentioned the high interest rates, for example. But it did act as a catalyst. Now, we have to always remember that the commercial bank will always remain a commercial bank which is profit-oriented. And it's all about risk appetite and risk weightage. But at the same time, banks cannot just ignore that 80% of the economy is SME. So banks are supporting SMEs, but at certain conditions. And if I may jump into a topic which was a challenge in the past and still is with SMEs and entrepreneurs and owners, and where they struggled with banks, and unfortunately it also failed, and I blame also both sides, the bank also, for not taking care of this point, is financial literacy. Now, most of the owners are business persons. They have an idea, and they know how to get the business, and they know how to grow the organization. And when I say financial literacy, it's not about how to read a balance sheet. But if you apply for a project finance, for example, you need to have cash flow projections, and the products related to that have a certain criteria of how to work with these bank products. And there is, until today, still a weakness on the side of SMEs to understand that dynamic, and in many ways, unwillingly, it backfired. And usually bankers don't see themselves as advisors to business owners. And that has to change. That has to change. So that's one element, very specific element the UBF has been working on intensively, is to help also change that mindset among the banking community that it's a partnership. It's not the classical client-bank relationship. You apply for a loan and that's it. No, it's a dynamic process where you as a banker have to also give advice, help together to get through this phase, especially in the first couple of years, to be one day in the upper scale of the SMEs, and maybe even to become a very successful corporate.
I think there's an extreme challenge for those, because as most of the audience is not involved in the SME sector, maybe we can share very honestly some of our stories. When we start companies as young founders, people usually ask you, what do you do? Now for me, my passion is corporate governance. Dr. Islam knows that well. So we work a lot with founders that say, well, I have to be CEO, Chief Strategy Officer, I have to be the CFO, I have to do the marketing. And the one that falls through the cracks most of the time is, who's your finance director? And they say, no, we have an accountant, yes. Right? They send us numbers. And as they look through their P&Ls, competition is fierce. Times go up, the good days and the bad days as an SME owner, and they're looking for efficiency every single day. We're very fortunate that we have Arjun that can sort of explain to us a little bit about what does technology mean for the SME sector, where should SME founders and CEOs and CTOs maybe, and I'm not talking about technology companies, I'm talking about industry specific or SMEs in specific industry sectors that haven't looked at technology enough to help have a more efficient platform going forward. If you had a room full of SMEs today, Arjun, what would you say to them?
Well, does it work? Yes. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me, by the way. Where technology comes in, I think it was one of the pillars that we saw in the earlier presentation. And today, you cannot run a business without technology, right? So technology is everywhere in our human life, right? And not even only in business, but also in our private lives. And in that sense, listening to the stories, right? I'm very honest. I'm a Dutch guy, so we are pretty blunt as well most of the time. So I'm not an entrepreneur, right? I'm not an entrepreneur like you guys are, right? Because I know that my strengths are somewhere else in running big businesses, in running complex processes, and all this stuff that we do within Microsoft. But I've been working on a daily basis with entrepreneurs, and it's so inspiring, first of all, to hear the stories, but secondly, to see how a company like Microsoft can be sort of the supporting factor behind the heroes, right? We don't have to be the hero ourselves, right? And I think where technology comes in is providing, today especially, technology that we used to see only in very big companies, right? If we think about just simple things like online meetings, right? Let's take a very simple example. That was technology that was 10 years ago only available in very big companies that had big IT departments, and they could only run it with big number of people. Today, this technology is available for all of us, right? At very low price, through the cloud, very easy to access, very easy to buy. And it's not only Microsoft providing it, by the way, there's many others as well. And I think what we need to change to drive this productivity, especially in SMEs, is to start using it, right? Because at the end of the day, what we do, I think, a lot today in very innovative businesses is still going to work in a very traditional way, right? We still go to our office at 9 o'clock in the morning. We go back home at 5 o'clock in the at 5 o'clock in the evening. We require all our personnel to be in
5 a.m. We do go 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, I know. You go from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 7 p.m., whatever the times are. But my point being is that we manage our organizations and our people in very industrial type of way, like if they are going to a machine that needs their physical availability there, right? And I think in the current world, we can be much more flexible in how we work together. We can be much more using the technology to drive individual productivity and solve a lot of issues of traveling, of timing, of time zones even, right? We're talking about a lot of international companies here. And I think by helping SMEs getting access to the technology, but also the usage of it, that is what we find very important. Secondly, I would say, and that is sort of the human capital factor, is that we see that with the bigger usage of technology in everything we do, we need to upskill everybody, right? Everybody needs to constantly be skilled in new technologies that are emerging, right? So this continuous learning, is what our CEO calls the growth mindset of being constantly, let's say, curious about what the next thing is and how to use it in a productive way, is something that Microsoft is also working on very actively to bring, let's say, education about new technologies, AI, all the technologies that were on the slide, through online means for free to you, all of you, right? And then at the end of the day, it becomes, I would say, your responsibility to be curious and to start learning online, right? Which we don't always see happening. So that's how we see our role, right? So we want to be the supporters of the heroes.
Sorry, I think we have an intervention.
Before I came today, I asked some of my fellow SME business owners what their challenges were and what they would like me to represent to this illustrious audience. And I want to be really brutal. The biggest challenge that all of us have is getting paid on time. And getting paid on time it promotes a smile and people think, oh, well, that's just the way and all this sort of stuff. But to come back to your point, first of all, I agree with you, there is equal blame. But when the bank employs people on a bonus scheme to sell you loans, that's a problem. Because they are motivated not by the honesty of the response, they're honesty by selling you the loan. So they sell you the loan and you sign up for the loan because you've just won the wonderful customer that you always dreamed of, a big company. You sign a contract with them and they really hit you hard and they say, okay, we want 60 days payment terms. So you get the bridging finance from the sales guy at the bank. You produce your cash flow forecast exactly as you say. I went back to school and studied for an MBA. I can do cash flow forecasts pretty well. We produce the cash flow forecast, and on day 60, the biggest customer we've ever had doesn't pay us. On day 90, we ring him up and say, where's our money? He says, oh, don't worry, you'll get paid. So what do you mean, don't worry? You're now 30 days late. I'm 30 days off my cash flow forecast. What am I going to do? I go to the lawyers. And I say, I've got a contract with this guy. He's now 30 days beyond his payment terms. What can I do? They said, well, you can sue him. You can take him to court. It'll take 6 months before it comes to court and another 6 months before you get the money. And in the meantime, you'll also lose the customer. So the biggest customer I have, I've just lost, and I've lost the money for a year, and my cash flow forecast has all gone out the window. And if I as the business owner, renege on the security check that I gave to the guy that sold me the loan, then I get locked up, which means my staff can't pay their bills, which means there's a whole consequence of losses that occur as a result. And sorry, just to finish the point being that this all results in a major default on the loan capital, which is why the banks don't want to lend anything to the SMEs. So I see the trigger for this not as the small percentage of dishonest business people that want to sucker the banks and run off with the money. I don't think it's that. I think it's this snowball effect of people not paying their debts on time, not having any recourse to the law to actually get them to pay it, and then we end up with people personally being responsible.
I was just going to turn to Dr. Islam and double check that this level of honesty is acceptable on the stage. If we should, yeah? No. We'll find out later. No, I think, Karl, I really appreciate the input. If we're being honest, while I was sitting there before I came up, I had to just transfer a significant amount of money to one of the investments that I have made as a company for exactly the same reason. We're bridging, they need the money. It happens. And I think that the takeaway for us today, for the people that are here from SMEs and for those of you that have friends that operate in SMEs, I want to make sure that this is not just a panel where we talk, but where we engage with yourselves and we're also looking forward, which is why I want to ask if the questions that we were going to put on the screen, or we have 3 questions that we put forward to the audience. Somebody from the organizing committee? Yes? Are they engaged? Yes? I'm looking for anybody in the audience that's going to give me a nod of approval here. No, I don't. Oh, yes, they are. So, the first question is, looking forward. We want to come away with takeaways today that are going to help us think about where SMEs will be over the next 5 years. We have discussed many times, challenging economic conditions ahead. For those of you that have the ability to vote, while you're voting, I'm going to ask the panelists their view. What is the most primary challenge for SME growth in the coming 5 years? A, is it lack of business confidence in SMEs? Are large multinationals not buying from them? Lack of market opportunities? Are we just going through a tough period in the next 5 years that people won't be doing business? Is it access to finance? Yusuf, the big question. Or is it international competition as more and more multinationals enter the market? So I hope you're all voting so we can maybe hope some live answers. Let's start with you, Yusuf. What do you think the biggest challenge for them is? And those are your choices. You can't choose anything else.
Yes. Can I just take this opportunity very quickly to give an answer to my friend and colleague? I know bankers are always the bad guys. One of the lessons learned from the crisis were 3 things. I'll just say it very quick. Today, banks have understood that they need to be very proactive when clients struggle. The only issue is that corporate culture still did not spread among business owners, that you can, once you see down the road that you're facing a problem, that you can approach the bank and say, listen, this client of mine is not paying me, like in this classical, which is the most biggest challenge today. Please help me. And banks have proactively, also through the UBF, through the central bank, have changed their stance on these views and became more proactive, more liberal and more understanding to support the clients in this kind of situation. So one recommendation is always go to the bank before the due date comes and be honest, saying this is the situation, this is what's going to happen. Culturally, not only here, but many places, you don't like doing that to the bank because of fear of losing your image. How they will react? Will they shut down all my facilities immediately? Those days are over. They evolved and they are looking at it in a more, with a proper action plan, and that it doesn't make any sense that if the whole chain goes down the drain then. Secondly, bankruptcy laws. They're in place. However, they have not yet been really used, but this will safeguard the issue of case to case, of course, of the jail.
But I don't want to go bankrupt. I want somebody to suspend the trade license of a large company that refuses to pay their bills on time. That's all I want.
Well, that doesn't happen anywhere, sir.
I think
when corporates fail,
when
it's not
corporates
that
fail,
easy,
I agree with you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in the UK, which is where I'm from, we have a small claims process where under the bankruptcy law for companies, I can file a mandatory winding up order against a large
You
corporate
can today in UAE.
for not paying their bills
Yes,
on time.
that's what I want to say. You can. The law exists, but it's still not set into practice because it's just two years. But those laws exist, and I would highly recommend that for everyone to look into these. You can exactly do that. And it's a period where all parties agree how to basically pay up at the end of the day.
Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
just want
Just a direct
to. This
question.
is a discussion we can have afterwards. I have my own viewpoints on it as well. I think just coming back to the question, you
Yes,
gentlemen
sorry.
did not see the answer yet, but it's very interesting. Karl, what do you think that out of the choices you had, was it lack of business confidence in SMEs, challenging market conditions, access to finance, or international competition? If you had to pick one.
So in 10 years, we've not had a single bad debt.
Okay.
And yet I find it almost impossible to get access to finance. We've got two scenarios. One where I have a sales guy selling me an 18% loan. My EBITDA isn't 18%, so it's insane to take an 18% loan. And then on the other hand, I have another bank that did offer me a loan with 700% cover on the amount they wanted to lend me, which is impossible. Okay. So access to finance gets my vote, and all I want is enough finance to be able to grow my business. I can predict the slowness of payment. I can make account and take risk assessment for that. But what I need is access to local finance that allows me to grow my business. We grew 1,000% in the last 5 years, personally financed, because the banks wouldn't support it. We've been profitable for 8 years.
Khalifa?
I will go with A.
A, lack of business confidence in SMEs. Arjun, do you have an opinion on this at Microsoft?
I would rather stay with no Y.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think what I hear, I would also go for 3. Right? I don't think there's a lack of trust in SME. There's no lack of business opportunity for sure in the region. So I think having the financial means to finance growth and drive growth, I think I hear that everywhere.
Can I give my answer? I'm actually with Khalifa on A. Before I joined the government, I was asked to join the government, I was advising on corporate governance, and the amount of companies that wouldn't touch me because I'm a 33-year-old Emirati advising on corporate governance was very odd. The audience believes it is C. So, Khalifa, you and I are the minority. We believe in A. Zero. No, we'll add a couple of percentage points there. In that, I hope this is helpful because I want to already jump to the next question because this is spurring conversation. Can we put the next question up on the screen? To survive difficult market conditions. Now, for those that have been in SMEs for over 10 years, the gentleman on the stage with me included, you go through ups and downs, and through the downs, what are the most important things that can help an SME? Number one, is it again access to finance to get through the tough times? Is it, as Karl mentioned, timely payments from clients? Is it the ease of hiring and firing for those that don't understand this? Really, with your variable costs and your fixed costs, can you offload some of your staff or hire part-time staff? Or is it the ease of regional expansion? If one market that you're in is not doing as well in the next coming years, can you quickly move into Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Egypt, Jordan to be able to start selling across the region? So while people are voting, I'll go now in the same order again. Yusuf, quick and sweet.
Timely payments.
Timely payments. Karl?
I'd love to say timely payments, but actually I think if you only ever focus in one market and you have a truly global offering, then you really are restricting yourself. And I think that it's always a good idea to operate in multiple markets. So to survive bad times in an economy, I think it's better to be spread your risk across multiple economies.
Interesting. Khalifa, now that you've seen the answers, you're going to go for something that's not there to remain the minority? Or okay, you haven't seen the answers.
Access to finance.
Access to finance, A. Arjun?
I would say B. I think cash is king in times when it's rough, right?
Once again, Khalifa, you are in the minority because 50% voted for timely payments and 50%
The reason
voted.
why, because they are not SMEs.
Yeah.
Come on.
The majority. No, I'm with timely payments as well. I think as somebody that came from the financial and corporate governance sector, definitely, if I can sum up the view, I think if you look at it from a financial perspective, if you're looking at it as an investor, and you see on the balance sheet a huge amount of receivables, that can sometimes, from an investor's perspective, put you off. Auditors have a big role to play, and that's a challenge going forward. Khalif, you want to?
I just want to add something. Actually, in the previous question, my second was access to finance. So, and here my second is timely payment. But the reason why I chose access to finance, because access to finance in the difficult times will help you to generate more sales with better payment terms, and then timely payment comes in the picture. That's why I chose that one.
Arjun, you want to say something?
Well, I think I mean the choices are limited, right? But I think in when times are rough, what I experienced at least in 2009 when Europe went through the whole world basically went through, but I was back in Europe at that time. I think there are many other factors that are important in a time of that, right? So first of all is actually keeping your best people, right? It's not about firing, but it's about keeping the best people in your company even at low times, right? So I would call that out, but also being very clear on your value proposition, right? I mean, I think I see a lot of SMEs that if you ask them, what are you doing? You get like very long answers, but you don't get crisp and clear the value that they offer to their customers, and especially in times where it's rough, you need to be very clear on your value proposition and what your value creation is, right? So there are many other factors than I think the ones on the slide.
I'd like to get to questions. We only have about 15, 20 minutes left. I'd love to take some questions from the audience. I hope this is helpful thus far. Please guide us and give us feedback. I don't want this to be an echo chamber of people in the SME space. I'm going to go to the last question, and I'm very, very cautious about one of the words that is usually used. It's called ecosystem. You know, how can we build a better ecosystem for the SME sector? Ecosystem is a very abstract term, so I want us to think in very detailed terms. The last question that I would like to ask, once again, vote and go through the order. Who should play a larger role in supporting the development of that sector, of that, dare I say it, ecosystem? Does the government need to play a bigger role? Is it large multinationals like Microsoft that are supporting but also should be purchasing more from them? Is it SMEs themselves, you know, get together, sort it out amongst yourselves, you're a large, you know, you're the majority of the economy, or do all of them have an equal role to play? So while you're all voting, Yusuf, I can...
All have a role.
Karl?
D, yes.
Yeah, all of them.
Khalifa?
SMEs themselves.
All of them. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit all boring, but I think the strength of, let's say, the combination between, let's say, SMEs and a company like Microsoft or bigger companies is that the way we do our business within a company like Microsoft, we can bring so much value even in the way we work, right? Not so much the technology itself or what our value proposition is. But I've been asked many times by, we have a big ecosystem of partners, right, selling Microsoft products. So I've been in many advisory councils of our partners who are all entrepreneurs themselves, right? And I've always seen, I was always wondering, okay, I'm not an entrepreneur, so how can I advise an entrepreneur? But actually bringing, let's say, some of the practices that we have within Microsoft to entrepreneurs, to how to run a business, how to do governance, how to do, I don't know, meetings, all sorts of areas, is actually very valuable. So I think the partnership between big companies and small companies is super crucial here.
Khalif, you want to say
I
something?
just wanted to add something. The reason why I didn't, of course, it makes sense to say all of them, but my problem was equal role. My problem was with the word equal. They all have a role, 100%. And the reason why I said C, because C has the bigger chunk. Because at the moment, the government is trying their best, but at the end, the government is an enabler. They shouldn't be the one taking the burden. And looking at the percentage of large enterprise, it was like 1%, right? From the sample you guys been studying. So I don't expect that 1% to be equally responsible for all the 95%, whatever. That's the reason behind my choices. That's why it's always 0.
Before we close with, I'm going to ask for those of you that have seen me on a panel, I always have my final question that I ask. I'm becoming quite popular for it. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Can you raise hands if you have a question, just so I can monitor time? Does anybody have a question? No questions from the audience.
Free consultancy.
Free consultancy. Questions from the SME sector? Oh, yes, there is one question. 2 questions. Do I have a third? Anybody for a third? No, we have 2 questions. We will do 2 questions, and I will then ask my famous third question. Ladies first. The lady in the yellow, can somebody get her a microphone? Otherwise, I will... Oh, there we go. If you can keep your... First, introduce yourself. Keep your question pointed. And if it is to any particular person, please ask them to answer.
Thank you very much. My name is Leonidis, and I run a company called Aquitude. Now, I love the panel, and congratulations on the honesty level. One of the stats that is not talked about or discussed openly, particularly in this region, is that 90% and over 90% of small businesses fail. So having been in this region for a very long time, and I left London to come here and then set up my business here, and I love this place. Thank you for having me. My question comes back to, in order to encourage entrepreneurship, do we also not have to address failure and also discuss it and make it less taboo? Because yes, it's difficult to be successful, and we know that not everyone will be Mark Zuckerberg. But how do we address that issue of not being successful or failing, for what you mentioned, Karl?
If I can just ask people that are the SMEs in the middle, so to speak. Karl, start with you. How do you address failure? Have you failed?
I think any SME or any entrepreneur that says they haven't failed is lying.
No, he's lucky one time, like out of 1,001.
Yeah. Yes, I've had failures, but I don't dwell on them, and I get on. I've been lucky that where I've failed, I've been in legal environments where it's possible to do a shutdown relatively cheaply and relatively easily. But it is very hard in this environment to actually fail. As we were talking earlier, the legal structures currently don't support you to fail. So many people, and this is I'm sure one of the problems for the banks, is the only option if you fail at the moment is to run away. And really that's not a very good alternative, particularly if the talent to create a business here leads 10%, 90%, 70%, whatever it is, to fail. You actually want to retain that talent in the country. Don't force them to run away. Maybe make them pay their debts over a long period of time or something, that's fine. But don't get them to the situation where they're going to lose their family, their home, their kids' schooling, their house, everything, just because the business didn't do so well.
Khalifa?
To be honest, I proudly failed multiple times, and I failed big numbers. And part of it was the 2009 and whatever, where actually my customer, who I had almost 3,000 villa project with them, have just decided due to lack of funds to not continue the project. And rendering out of that failure, I had to spend around 4 years in the courts paying the blame of not being paid. But still, we had to get blamed. Of course, failure to me is 1 point closer to success. And that's the problem we have with the culture here. The culture, if you fail, they will follow this failure to your granddaughter or son for the next 200 years. But to be honest, this has been changing the last 5 to 10 years, to be honest. People started from such events understanding that failure is not haram, like it's possible. You understand me? It's not a taboo anymore. But I really give an honest recommendation for all entrepreneurs. Do not stretch yourself to fail when your failure will make you fall on a tough ground. Make sure you fall on a cushion. Because as you said, if you didn't have that cushion, whether it's a law or finance or family support, you will be in jail, unfortunately. So try to design your failures.
I just want to echo what they said. You all would have never have heard of the famous music studio Fairplay Music in the UAE, because it was the biggest failure of my life, having funded a music studio thinking we were going to succeed in the Middle East writing English music. It does happen more often than not. Maybe we should, as a recommendation, as a takeaway from this, have a panel at the next Economic Forum on stories of failure Dr. Islam, if you allow us to maybe share sometimes the challenges of what it's like when it doesn't go so well. Thank you very much for your question. Gentleman at the back in the gray jacket and the blue shirt.
Yes, I'm Pranav Modi. We are a tax consultancy company based in Dubai. I personally feel that there's a lot of language dominance over here in this region, specifically in UAE. It's been like more and more of the SMEs are the expats. Of course, we are not very well familiar with the Arabic language, but even when we have to deal with any of the government authority, there's a lot of a dominance about the language of an Arabic language to be known and to be understood and to be taken into conversation even while drafting also, even with the Dubai courts also. So I feel that there can be an ease of a kind of a communication with the government, and also it can be so that yes, being an expert into this region, we are also being considered as equal to the other local people over here.
So the question, can I phrase a question around that? Is there something that the government can do to ease working in Arabic?
Yes, something from the part of a government wherein it becomes a very easy to get into a conversation with government at any moment of time we want to. Even with the banks also.
Karl, as the representative of Arabic.
I'm sorry, but you're not going to like my answer. My first employee was a bilingual Arabic-English speaker. So hire some Arabic speakers. This is an Arabic-speaking country, and we are guests in this country. We are fundamentally important guests in this country, but if you don't hire Arabic speakers, then it's your problem.
I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for your question, sir. I will send you my CV. I speak both Arabic and English. The lady to his right. We will take one more question, and then I will ask my final question.
Hello, my name is Mariana Denadai. I have a long history in this country. I cannot consider myself today an SME because I closed most of my companies. But I would like to understand from your point of view, what is the role of a local sponsor play in the development of new SME?
I just want to add something here because, I mean, I understand your concern completely. I've heard stories and I've seen them. I've been approached by people where I refuse to be a silent partner or just on papers. To be honest, the reason why this policy was put in place is for two reasons, where you can use the funds from people who have excess fund in the region to be your partner. The second is transfer of know-how, because we are a learning, let's say, society, and we would love to get partnered with all these international great minds to learn together and build something together for this region. So all other practices outside those two frameworks are actually, I consider them honestly illegal. Because if my country is trusting me to be an owner, I should be a real owner, not just take some fund. Actually, it's even in our religion, it's not even, it's haram actually, to be just be a fake partner just for, because you're just fooling your government.
On a note to close, I wanted to ask the final question. It's one that I use on every panel. It's even more exciting now after the new Disney film came out. Imagine a genie was standing here, but instead of granting you 3 wishes, would grant you 1. You can decide whether or not he may or may not look like Will Smith. Yusuf, what would you ask your genie to help SMEs grow in the region? Always stuns the panel. This is fantastic. If anybody, please jump. Oh no, you ready?
No, I wanted to say that SMEs can provide substantial security for the banks, but no, I would manufacturing, in turn, that it really gets a much higher traction in the UAE. Manufacturing, and as a means to export much further. I think that is the place where we need to really improve manufacturing. It's still very limited.
Karl, 1 wish.
I have no problem in innovating new ideas. I have no problem with financing them. I have no problem with recruiting staff. I have no problem with the language. I have absolutely no problem with living here. I think it's the most fantastic place to live on the planet. The only wish that I have is that I have a quick, cheap way of forcing my customers to pay me on time. That's all. Everything else I can make, I can grow. I can grow this business to the sky. But I just want these guys to honor their commitments and pay me on time. I'm not asking them to pay me fast, just pay me when you said you were going to pay me. Khalas.
Inshallah. Khalifa.
I just wish they can take us more serious.
Arjun?
This is a tough question. No, I think I would wish for not only the payment, but what I've learned being here in the region compared to, let's say, back home, is that payment, legal framework, being allowed to fail, right? All these, I would say, foundational things that we believe, that I was grown up with feeling that it was very normal. That was my biggest learning coming to the region, that it's not everywhere that case, right? And if those things would be solved easier, then the business can thrive very, very quickly in this region. There's no lack of opportunity at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude before our coffee break. First and foremost, thanking you for indulging us, for tolerating my approach to moderating panels. To Yusuf, Karl, Khalifa, and Arjun, thank you so much for your candid conversation and for hopefully providing value. To the Department of Economic Development and Dubai SME, I hope we have put forward a forward-looking approach and some ideas for yourselves to look forward. For any disrespectful comments or somebody that felt offended, Samhoudi, forgive me, I didn't mean to do it. It's just we hope to get some interesting conversations. Thank you all again. I wish you a very Merry Christmas for those celebrating and a Happy New Year to you all. Thank